So one of the questions that I've been asked most over the past couple of years when I'm working with executive leaders, leadership teams, or people who are developing into leadership roles has been, as a leader in an organization, how do I show up for my people during times like this, when we're in a pandemic or when we're just in a time of crisis? And so there's 4 pieces of advice that I give to everybody when we do this or when we talk about this. And you're going to recognize some of these from watching a previous video that I did. But this is a perfect time for you to refocus on your purpose. There are probably some things that your organization has picked up over the course of the past few years that maybe are things that sounded good, might have been fun adventures, but didn't really move you towards that sense of purpose that your organization is driving towards. So this is a great opportunity to, one, step back and say, are there operations that we're currently funding that aren't necessarily moving us towards our stated goal? And as a part of that conversation, making sure that everyone understands and has the same interpretation of that vision is really important as well. Because while you may say, here's your mission, there may be 15 or 20 different interpretations of what that actually means. And so it's really important that you dive in with your team members and get clear on what is your interpretation of this organization's purpose. And if there are mismatches, it's a great opportunity to dive in and have a deeper conversation. So number 1, take this time to step back and refocus on that purpose behind your organization. Number 2, when we make decisions, things like, are we going to do a round of layoffs? Are we going to reduce this line of business and things along those lines? Make sure that these are values-based decisions and not just financial-based decisions. There is a temptation to use the ledger as the yes or no when we are in times where we aren't very sure about where our income is going to be in the next year or two. And so we get into this trap where we start making decisions that end up actually undermining the safety of people inside the organization, because we kind of throw values out the window. And if we're only making decisions based on viewership, how many people are coming to our website, how much are we making on this product as a percentage of profit, those kinds of things. If those are the only factors we use when making decisions in our business, our employees feel less and less safe, and they're going to take less and less risks. They're only going to play it safe when it comes to the decisions that they make with the things that they really contribute to the organization, because they're going to feel like if they step too far out, they're going to be the first ones to get axed. And so when we make decisions like reducing our investment in this area of the business, or cutting off a partnership, or changing the way that we operate, make sure that we're doing them in a way that reflects who we say that we are, what our company culture is, what our values are here. And if you can't see your values in those decisions, then it's a good time to step back and check into the way that we come to our conclusions in this company. Is it just based on someone's preference, or is it because we just have different interpretations of those values? And if that's the case, it's another good opportunity to get alignment, just like you did in that purpose conversation. The third tip that I talk about is making sure that we are the most communicative that we have ever been with our team members. So we have to ramp up our communication and our transparency as much as possible. And the reason for that is because in times of uncertainty, when we don't necessarily know what's going to happen in the next 6 to 8 to 12 months, then what we end up doing is we hold tight to what we do know and we fill in the gaps for what we don't know. And as a human being, our brains are wired, we are hardwired to self-preserve. And so what we tend to do is our narratives that fill into our brain are ones that gravitate towards the worst possible scenario. And it's not because we are just awful people, but the reason is because our brain is trying to prepare itself for the worst possible scenario. And so as leaders in organizations, if you don't want your team members to be constantly stressed, constantly worried, sitting in this place of not knowing, the best thing that you can do is be high communicators. Maybe we're not in the office, so we can't talk to each other just as much like we would have in normal conversations. That means you need to be sending more emails to keep people updated on what's going on, what decisions are being made, how did we make those decisions, right? When we talk about transparency, it's not about everybody knows everything and there's no room for secrecy. Some things legally or ethically we need to hold close to the chest, but beyond that, we have to challenge ourselves to say, why are we keeping this secret from people? And if we can be more open with people, we give them insight into how we're making decisions. As an employee, that gives me a lot more comfort when decisions are being made to know that I am or am not at risk here. So ramp up that communication and be as honest and open with your employees as you can. And then finally, if we have to make sacrifices, we do it together. A lot of times what we'll do is sacrifice the people at the edge of the organization, our newest people, our lowest ranking people. We try and protect the people who have been here the longest. And we think that's somehow morally right. But in reality, it just communicates that no one here is really safe. And if you are one of the people who is lucky enough to work your way up here, that next time there are cuts or there's a budget decision that is going to be tough, then you might be on the chopping block again, because we might have less new people at the edges of the organization to get rid of. If we are going to make sacrifices, if we're going to expect people to take pay cuts in management roles, are our executives being willing to make those cuts as well? Because we have to project it before we expect it. If we want to expect people to step up and take one for the team, we got to make sure we are taking more as leaders of that hit than they are, because we have to convey to them that we are in this together. When we know that we are in it together, we are more likely to band together and work much harder to try and come up with solutions, versus if I'm just trying to make sure I don't get fired. And in that case, what I'm probably doing is coming up with contingency plans elsewhere as well. So make sure that if there's sacrifices, we've communicated what those are, how we came to these conclusions, and why we made that decision ultimately. And then we do that as a team. And especially as leaders, we have to be the first ones to lead that charge of making a sacrifice. If you can do these 4 things, you have a better chance of having good, strong relationships with your team members throughout, whether it's this pandemic or the next crisis or a time of uncertainty in your organization.